now we come to what I think is the most important part of this video. Why I love the character so much. And the most simple explanation I can give is, I love this character because he's so funny. He's ridiculous. He makes me laugh. He's fun. He's enjoyable. He brings something to the universe of Star Wars that is just different. In a story that, let's be honest, is dark generally, about war and conflict. He gives us light. He makes us laugh. He brings the joy to this universe. And I just love that about him. And he has some of the most memorable moments, some of the most memorable lines in all of episode 1 for me. I mean, his moments and his lines and just the parts of the movies he's in are the things I pretty much remember the most. Aside from the pod racing and the Duel of the Fates, that whole final scene, Jar Jar is what I think about when I think of episode 1. I don't care what anybody has to say. I love Jar Jar. I think he's funny. He's neat. He's cool. As far as I'm concerned, I'm glad he was put into this world. But let's think about some other things here. Let's dive deeper into why I love this character. You gotta, like I said, honestly, I remember Jar Jar more than I remember a lot of the other characters. Okay, sure. I remember all the main ones, whether it's Luke, Leia, Han, Anakin, Obi-Wan, Darth Vader. 3 hours later. And then you got the Ewoks and you got... Regardless. Yeah, I remember all of them. But Jar Jar sticks out. Jar Jar is unique. He's different from all those other characters. And some people admittedly don't like different. But I do. And I love him for it. I love the fact that he's in this world. He was an unexpected addition or an unexpected pleasure when it came to this movie. I'll be honest. He pops up and thinking about it, I was like, oh, well, that's strange. That's weird. You don't think the character is going to be that important, but he ends up being important. And I love that. And you know, maybe, like I said, maybe it was unexpected. But that is the joy. When there's something about a movie that can just grab you or that you're not expecting, for me, those are some of the best types of surprises or some of the best moments in film. And that was Jar Jar. He felt a little out of place, let's be honest. When you look at Star Wars overall, Jar Jar doesn't quite feel like he belongs at times. But that's what he was supposed to be. He was supposed to be the outcast. He was supposed to be the weirdo. He was supposed to be the one that nobody expected anything from. Nobody had any expectations for him. And he was going to prove them all wrong. And that's what Jar Jar does. I love Jar Jar for that. I love how easy it is for him to care about someone that he just met. Like I mentioned, right away, he cares about Qui-Gon. As soon as Qui-Gon saved his life, he cares about him. He meets Obi-Wan, he cares about him. He does not want them to go through the center of the planet to get to the rest of Naboo. He just met them. Like, what normal person, let's be honest, does that? Yeah, you could say love at first sight. You could say it happens on occasion, and it does. I'm sure it does. But how often does that really happen? And he has this carefree attitude. He doesn't care what happens. Oh, he's going to show you. If he's scared, oh, he's going to tell you. He's going to be, oh, Misa so scared. No, Misa don't want to go through the core. That bad idea, bad mojo. But he's going to do it. That ties back into his loyalty to his friends and the people he just met. But he really does. I mean, you see it more on Tatooine, let's be honest. Or on the ship. When he's talking to the droids, when he meets R2 for the first time. He just has a carefree way about him. And I really love that about the character. He also has this very unique look. I want to say it's simple, but it's not. If you think back to the original trilogy, like we've been doing a lot in this video, there weren't really any unusual, strange designs. Like I mentioned before, a lot of them, yeah, were different, but you could tell, okay, that's a person in a mask, or that's a costume. They all had some humanoid aspect to them. The Ewoks, they looked great, but they were fuzzy little bears. You could recognize what they were. A lot of the creatures you could. You saw a bantha, oh, that's like a woolly mammoth or an elephant there. The band members, a lot of fun, but you barely see them. Jabba the Hutt, a slug. All these characters were recognizable in some way. All these aliens, they were recognizable. Jar Jar, he really isn't. I mean, now looking at him, it's like, could be considered a lizard type, maybe a reptile, amphibian. You might be able to see a little bit. But it wasn't as clear with Jar Jar as it was with these other characters. And that's another great attribute of this character. Let's just say it. I loved his shenanigans. I laughed at every single one of them. And I still do to this day. As I'm talking and I'm thinking about them, I'm laughing. You can hear in my voice. I mean, like I mentioned, some of my favorite moments. The tongue between the pod racing bolts. The shooting out his tongue to grab food on Tatooine. Saying, don't go through the core, bad idea. Like, there's just so many moments, so many things he says that I love. Oh, lest I forget what I've been talking about through this whole video. The battle scene that he's in. The Gungan fight with the battle droids. His involvement. The crazy things that happen. The scene that this figure is based off of. The fact that he got the shield and the spear. He got his little water bomb thing here. That scene is very memorable, and I love it. You know what, Jar Jar? You've had your moment. Now it's my turn to finish off this video. I do like you, though. Anyway, Jar Jar was just so great. There was a part of me that maybe wished that I could be more like him. That I could be carefree as he was in episode 1. Like I mentioned, I feel like they really did take a different route with this character. Jar Jar was that character, that being that you wanted to hug. At least I did. I mean, look at that face. How can you not want to hug that face? He just seemed so friendly, so cuddly. Though, let's be honest, his skin probably hurt. But he was just one that automatically, people talk about actors that they've worked with or friends of theirs, people that you can just go right up to, give a hug, and you get along with so well. And I just think Jar Jar is one of those characters. If Jar Jar was real, I feel like he's somebody that I'd want to hang out with. I don't care about shenanigans. Would they put me in trouble? I'm sure they would. But I also have faith that we'd get out of it. He's just a character that I just want to give a big hug to and say, you know what? Everything's going to be all right, and you don't get the respect you deserve. Well, wait a minute. That sounds familiar? Because that's what I'm trying to do. Like I said, he's one of the main things that stands out in episode 1 to me. I feel like maybe I even related to him to a certain degree. In comics, Peter Parker was the outcast. And when I was younger, I related to that aspect of it. Not necessarily because I was outcast in my family or anything, but I felt more like an outcast at school. I didn't hang out with people all the time. I had maybe 1 or 2 really good friends. I thought the same thing with Jar Jar. I could understand his desire to want to be with people, to be with a group that enjoyed the same stuff he did. Which is why I love the fandom community for the most part. And when I say most part, when people just start being jerks or yeah, that's not why we're here. We're here to celebrate Star Wars and celebrate Jar Jar. But it's nice to be part of a community. It's nice to be part of a group that appreciates the things you love, that you can get along with, and they embrace you for who you are. Let's be honest, that's all Jar Jar really wanted. He wanted to be accepted by his fellow Gungans, and the fact that he was accepted by this species, by this type of creature that wasn't his, meant a lot to him. And maybe that's why he connected with the Naboo more than he did with the Gungans. But like I said, we all connect with different people. Maybe not necessarily the ones that we're always with. Maybe not even our own family at times. But Jar Jar definitely embraced that side. And I'm thinking back on it. And yeah, deep down, I think that was probably one of the reasons I really liked Jar Jar. Like I said, of course, there was the humor. He was funny. He was just a great character, and I laughed every time I saw him. But another heartfelt reason, I think, that I love this character is just the memories. I think the first time I saw episode 1, part of me thinks I saw it before this, but I think the very first time I saw episode 1, it was with my dad and my uncle. Now, my dad and I have gone to every single Star Wars movie since I watched the original. That's kind of become something that we make sure we do. At least I do. And going to see it with my uncle was a treat, because I hardly ever saw him. He lives in California. So we connected over this movie. It was a movie all three of us wanted to see. And we all loved Jar Jar. We laughed and we had a good time. I mean, this shirt I gave to my uncle. And he gave it back to me a couple of years ago. I put a poster of Jar Jar on the back of his bedroom door before I left. My aunt, who at the time, she was just dating my uncle, we were talking about Phantom Menace, and she's like, oh, I would really like to see that movie. And automatically we jumped in and said, we'll go again. And part of that was because of Jar Jar. I saw it twice in 1 week, and I don't do that for a lot of movies, though I guess some people would argue I do, because I do like seeing Marvel movies 2 times in 1 weekend, but that's beside the point. Speaking of that, I have here a few comments from other people who do like Jar Jar. Primarily, I will say, they're my dad and my uncle. But I asked both of them similar questions to the ones I answered here. And my dad said what he liked about Jar Jar was it was just a fun character. Crazy things, they always seem to work out for him. He's that character, like I said, you'd miss him if he was gone. You don't realize it at the time, though. At least that's what my dad said. He's enjoyable. He cared about people, and he just fell into the right things. It was all by chance. He just fell into them. And Dad did admit, sometimes it was just dumb luck. He feels that Jar Jar was important to this film, similar to some ways that I mentioned earlier. That his connection to the Gungans, he was the contact, the go-between. And he said what he thought. I'm sorry. Jar Jar said what he thought. There was no filter on him. He added human to both sides of the equation or of the conflict. I'm adding a few of these words because I can't remember exactly what my dad said, but these are his comments, his main points. Now, the big question I had was, why did he think people don't like Jar Jar? He said it makes them realize that Star Wars isn't real. It's exaggerated dumb luck. And that's a good point. The fun and the dumb luck and everything just might take some people out of the movie. For me, it's just because it's not what they want. They want the spaceship battles. They want the characters they know. They want lightsaber battles. They want great music. They don't want the comedic aspects of Jar Jar. That's why I feel people don't like him. comments from my uncle. He said, in his simplicity, we see strength and we see his devotion to his family and his friends. And this is what makes him great. This is what gives him the greatness that we perceive. And why don't people like him, according to my uncle, he just very simply said he doesn't show superpowers. Which I guess in this day and age would make sense, because superhero movies are the big name films, the billion-dollar films of our time. But Star Wars is a billion-dollar film also. But I think what he means by that, if he's watching this, hopefully I can add a little bit to what you said. I think what he means is when you look at the idea that the Force is a type of superpower for the Jedi. Not saying that's what I say, not saying that's what I would agree with, but to some people it is a superpower. It's a mystical type of idea. Jar Jar doesn't have that. He's just a normal creature trying to live his life in this crazy mixed up galaxy that he's in. So I want to thank both my dad and my uncle for adding to this conversation. But now, let's turn it over to our special guest, my buddy, you've seen him before on this channel, my brother from another mother, Cletus McConville over at Nat One Productions. Cletus, take it away.
All right, Pete, so you want to know my opinion on Jar Jar Binks for May the 4th? Well, you chose the right person to ask. Sorry about the sound in the background, there's a storm going on right now. But, let me tell you what I think of Jar Jar Binks. Jar Jar, for me, was funny. I was a kid when I first saw Jar Jar Binks. I thought he was funny, I thought he was fun. I didn't really think too much about his character. Now, I realized that there were a lot of problems with, licensing him with toys and stuff. Specifically, some of the weird toys they started putting out, like a Jar Jar Binks lollipop where his tongue was the lollipop. That was kind of weird. That was weird. But, hear me out. Jar Jar as a character is extremely important for the story of Star Wars. And I will preach this till the end of days, because he's the one that gives the emergency powers to the Supreme Chancellor. Now, I think if the fans didn't get so upset about Jar Jar Binks, he may have had a bigger role. It's possible we had a dark Jar Jar thing going on there for a little bit in George Lucas's mind. But what George decided to do with a character that everybody hated was literally make him the most hated person in the galaxy. There are later books and stuff that talk about Jar Jar Binks as being like the shunned one in Naboo. If you read one of the Aftermath books, there's actually an entire scene where it talks about how Jar Jar just does clowny stuff for the kids, and everybody hates him because he's the one who gave the emergency powers to the Supreme Chancellor, to Palpatine. So, he became hated both in-universe and outside of the world. But I think it's entirely unjustified to hate him. Okay, he was given a bad rep. Okay, he tried to do the right thing in Episode 2. He really did, and, he just got a bad hand. It just ended up being the plan all along, really, for Emperor Palpatine, Mr. Puppet Master, just controlling everything. But I love Jar Jar. I love, even with the fact that George did that just to kind of, tell the fans, oh, look, he went ahead and ruined everything, now you shouldn't hate him. And I never did. But I like that George did that because it created some really interesting dynamic for a really silly character. He wasn't just silly anymore. He had depth. And to me, Jar Jar has always had some kind of depth. His silliness, to me, is just part of his character. It made me laugh as a kid. It makes me laugh even now. But Jar Jar is, the unfortunate fool. And a great character in drama and a great character in Star Wars. I like Jar Jar, and other people should too.
Thank you to Cletus for those insights into his reasoning as to why Jar Jar is not only a great character, but why he's important to the Star Wars lore. If you want to see more opinions that Cletus has on Star Wars, check out his channel at Nat One Productions. He has a ton of Star Wars stuff over there. He's currently doing a Star Wars role-playing podcast, which he just launched today on Star Wars Day, and I highly recommend you listen to it. I admit I haven't gone through the whole thing yet as of this recording, but it is very entertaining and is fun. You know, most of us have said similar things. We love Jar Jar because he's funny. He's loyal to his friends. He's clumsy. The situations he gets into, all that we just find enjoyable and fun. But like I started at the beginning, I never could understand why Jar Jar was so despised or why he was frowned down upon. Because to me, he was just another character in Star Wars. He was just another type of creature, another species, another personality to give this world more life. It was a way, as Lucas said about the original trilogy, to make this world feel lived in, to make this universe feel like it was lived in. Personally, I think one of the big reasons people didn't like Jar Jar is because he broke the mold. He did not fit in with the preconceived notions of what a Star Wars movie or a Star Wars character was. He wasn't a Jedi. He wasn't a Sith. He wasn't a Force wielder. He wasn't a droid. He wasn't one of the species that we've seen before, whether that was an Ewok or any of the many other ones that we saw. He wasn't related to any of the other characters that we knew. He wasn't somehow a Skywalker. He wasn't somehow related to Obi-Wan. And people didn't like that, at least not with episode 1. And that's a shame, because there was so much this character had to offer. This character makes you smile. He makes me smile. I enjoy episode 1 because of Jar Jar. Sure, like I said, there's moments in the movie that I love, probably more than Jar Jar, but that's just because those are Star Wars moments. But you take Jar Jar out, I feel like you lost a really good part of the movie, and a really fun part of the movie. So, why don't you watch episode 1 again? I know, maybe you hate it, but take a second look at episode 1. Or just look Jar Jar up here on YouTube and watch the clips. And think about what I've said. Hopefully, you'll look at this crazy, lucky as all heck character in a new light. And maybe you'll appreciate him a little bit more. But let me know what you think of Jar Jar. I'm sure that I'm going to get a lot of comments saying that I am wrong. Jar Jar is the worst character ever, that he never should have existed. That I can't talk. But you know what? Fine. You're entitled to your opinion. But I think you're missing out on what Jar Jar really was. Who Jar Jar is. What he stood for. The type of character he was. If you love Jar Jar, comment down below and say it. Let our voices be heard. If I had an Instagram, I would start a hashtag, something that would be like, hashtag Jar Jar is great, or hashtag love for Jar Jar. Because Jar Jar needs more love in this world. And he is the most underappreciated character in the Star Wars lore, as far as I'm concerned. So, until next time, don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe to my channel. I have a ton more videos like this coming up. I've got many Marvel videos coming up. I'm going to have my Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness review coming up tomorrow. I've got plenty of Spider-Man reviews coming, plenty of Aladdin reviews, and many, many more. So, until next time, remember, read what you love, enjoy what you love, and let's all work for a better fandom. I'll see you next time.
Next, I want to thank Peter for everything he said about me. Hopefully you appreciate me more. And as he said, enjoy what you love, read what you love, and I'll see you next time.